This is the Mershman Seeds Agricultural Weather Outlook for August 5th, 2017. Well, one of the things I'm looking for this time of year are mesoscale convective complexes, or MCCs. These are these really big systems that develop late in the day, can produce severe weather, then move across from northwest to southeast or west to east. And they're a component of summertime precipitation over the plains and Midwest that brings us a lot of rain. We need that to keep our soil moisture recharged. But we've had this really weird type of pattern here, very amplified going into summer, which isn't typical, at least not the persistence nature of this. So we've had these interesting summer temperature swings, very, very hot for a while, and then more recently, much cooler. Now, over the last week, we had some rain needed, where needed, but other areas needed some drying, and we had a bit of drying as well. Now, let's take a look at July, just a review of July. This is the total precipitation. Now, look at Illinois, Wisconsin border, over 6 inches of rainfall, and that extended into most of Indiana and Ohio. And that's continuing that trend that started in the spring months and now continues, and the problem has been too much rain, so we nearly need to dry in that area. Out further to the west, we need more rain. Look at Iowa. Iowa received less than a half inch of rain over the western two-thirds. Northeast received a lot more rain. Then the western Corn Belt. Well, look at Nebraska. Nebraska has seen some improvement in areas. It hasn't been quite so bad in July as in June, but still we have pockets of below normal rainfall, and we still have a lot that needs to be made up. Now, as far as temperatures go, you can see that amplified flow pattern with the unshaded areas over most regions of the central and east. That's saying near normal temperatures. Then as we go off to the west, above normal, but not exceedingly so until you really get into the upper plains and the western U.S. Now, over the last week, well, we did have some rain from parts of Nebraska, North and South Dakota. Those areas need more rain. Now, it's scattered. It was not something to say, hey, this is ending all concern for rain, but it was needed. I got a report from someone in Nebraska, a grower in Nebraska, that said they had 7 inches of rain relatively recently. So you can see there are some pockets of heavier rain, but it's not all that widespread. Iowa need a lot of rain right now would be great. There was a little bit. There were some pockets of an inch or two, but widely scattered. Most areas received maybe a quarter inch or so, but lots of areas didn't receive much at all. Then as we get into the eastern Corn Belt, that's a region that could dry out a bit, and you can see many areas, not all, received at least some light or moderate rainfall, so the trend was positive. So overall, with the exception of the middle part, Iowa notably, the west and the east had a pretty good week as far as what type of weather we needed to see. Now, temperatures were unusually cool, centered right over Kansas. You can see temperatures 10 degrees below normal in that region, but most of the Corn Belt all the way from the Dakotas, Iowa, Missouri, and then in the eastern Corn Belt, below normal temperatures over the last week. Here's your current soil moisture. Gives you some idea of where we need less rain and more rain, but I'm beginning to see more white here over the eastern Corn Belt, some pockets. That's saying we're getting a little bit back closer to normal. If you want to see how it's changed over the last week, well, I mentioned that this area here that's been dry, Nebraska, look at that. We had some green or some blue here, and that's saying it got wetter. That's good. Soil moisture's got a bit wetter. This area, the eastern Corn Belt, got drier a bit. That's good. So overall, some parts over the last week actually experienced some positive type rainfall anomalies. Now, there are a couple systems in the tropics we're keeping an eye on. With that cold front that's pushed down, there's really not much chance that these are going to be affecting us. They're going to stay to our south. So right now, and for the next month or so, I'll be really watching the tropics because some of that moisture can work up into the Midwest. Right now, I don't see a scenario that would occur. So the jet stream this week, we're going to continue to have that digging trough of low pressure aloft, still amplified. Here's your ridge of high pressure, here's your trough of low pressure, and what we're going to see is a continuation of cooler weather. Now, right along the boundary here of the cool air, that's going to be where we're going to see the best chance of, right in along this boundary here is the best chance of our more active weather. But in the cooler air, right in that cooler air, it's not going to be nearly as much. Okay, so let's take a look at the precipitation forecast. Now, Kansas City has really got whacked by a lot of very heavy rain near Kansas City and adjacent regions. And it looks like this week will be another shot of very heavy rain in that region, extending down into eastern Oklahoma, and then along this boundary that I mentioned, right along that nearly stationary boundary, be areas of low pressure pushing along that. You can see several here, and that will be enhancing precipitation. Now, I drew this white line to sort of show that into the cooler air, the northward of that heavier rain is going to be quite limited. So we could still see some rain into Iowa and other areas that need rain. Could see some rain in Indiana and Ohio that don't need as much rain, but the heaviest rain is going to be held to the south by the cooler, more stable air and going to stay out of a majority of the U.S. Corn Belt. Now let's get into August 10th through 15th. Similar pattern, not as amplified. You don't see these colors here. You don't see the shading colors quite as strong. So what you see here is still these anomalies, but they're gradually over the next 10 days or so, next 2 weeks, are going to be diminishing. So right through 10 days, they look fairly strong. Matter of fact, if you look for the number of 90-degree days in the next 10 days, look at this. Over the entire Corn Belt right now, 0. So here we are. My goodness, it's August, and we're not even seeing 90-degree readings. Holy cow, that really is pretty amazing. Then we get into the 15th through the 20th. Well, what do we see here? I don't see any more blue, and that's saying the jet stream's starting to lift to the north. There's still a bit of a dip in the jet stream, so it looks like the trend is going to be slow. So right through August 20th, primarily the first half of that period, we're going to see below normal temperatures over almost most of the Corn Belt, especially the lower sections, the middle, central, off into the eastern Corn Belt, below normal temperatures. And this very well could extend right through the 20th of August. Right now it looks like it'll definitely be the next week or so, but it could actually be most of the next 2 weeks. So here's precipitation anomalies for week 1. If we do get some of that rain pushing up more into Nebraska, I don't think it will. This is an ensemble, and what I showed you before I think was a little bit more fine-tuned, but that would be needed. And then here's week 2. It does show that that front could be gradually lifting up to the north and give us a better chance of rain. I think right now the area that for week 2, this area is going to be really getting soggy if we get back-to-back weeks right in here, and that is that possibility over this region, generally just south of the Corn Belt. I do not think that this lighter shade of green right now is going to be all that much, but that's how it looks right now. So as you can see, areas in blue over the next 10 days, soil's getting wetter. So Kansas, scattered areas of Nebraska, but not all that much. But generally, most of the Corn Belt, either not much change or still continuing on the dry side. And it looks like the wetter soil's off to the south. So in summary from today's briefing, very heavy rain near and generally south of Kansas City and adjacent regions. The big trend is going to be this continued below normal temperatures the next 10 days, most areas. Enough rain in some spots, but overall I think we're going to be looking at below normal precipitation along with the cooler weather. So that's this week's briefing. Like I said, this is August, believe it or not, and we sure have some pleasant temperatures, and if you're in a dry area, at least the good news is these cooler temperatures are going to limit evaporation from the soils. Hope you all have a great week. Take care.